So today I'm going to start with step 1 of building the 8-foot stitch and glue dinghy. So this is going to be a quarter scale model because I don't have a place to build a full scale model and I don't have any use for it afterwards anyway, so this is just going to be a small version. This is exactly the same size as a 4x8 sheet at quarter scale. And as you can see, I have this laid out with a square right here. You probably won't be able to find a square that's 4 feet by 8 feet. You can still use a square to mark out the dimensions from the drawings. So basically all I'm doing is taking the dimensions from the drawings there, and then basically using this ruler to graph out where they are on this board. So for example, this first point here is just under 3 inches at scale. And then so that 11 7/8 basically works out to just under 3 inches, and we need to go up a quarter inch, which at my scale will be 1/16 of an inch. So I'll just move the square from there to there, measure up 1/16 of an inch, and make a mark. So when I make a mark, I like to use just little corners like this. And that's because if you make a cross, you don't know exactly where the center is, especially depending on the width of your pencil. This is a very fine tip pencil, so it doesn't really matter too much here, but I make a corner, and then I know the outside of that corner is going to be where I am going to make my cut. So I'm just going to keep going along here. So that was that point. I'm just going to move over here to the next point, and it tells you the dimensions there, and so I'll just follow those dimensions and mark it out on the sheet. Okay, so it's kind of hard to see on camera because I'm using such a fine pencil, but I have all these markings of where each point in the dimensions are, and the first thing that you have to do is kind of look for outliers, see something that doesn't look right. So for example, this mark here is a lot higher than the ones around it. So like that one, that one, that one, it just doesn't seem to match. So I'll go back and check the dimensions on that. But aside from that, then it's time to start connecting the dots. Okay, so the issue with that point has been resolved. It was just about a 30-second off. It's really easy to do with the scale to get things just slightly off like that. And so now it's time to start connecting the dots. So to connect the dots on the curved surfaces, instead of using a straight edge, use a flexible batten. So in this case, I'm using this random piece of cedar strip that I had laying around, and you can bend it to the shape of the points. And when you do that, look for points that don't line up. And if there's a point that just doesn't make any sense, go back and check the dimensions. Okay, so I just finished connecting the dots on the side panel. As you can see, in places like this, the marks aren't quite on the line. That's okay, as long as the line is fair and very close to the marks. That's really what matters more than anything. There's going to be a little bit more error just because of the scale I'm working at, but you're always going to find a little bit of error, partly just due to inaccuracies in the measurements in the drawings, and partly due to just inaccuracies in your own measurements. In the end, it actually doesn't matter as much as you might think. You can get away with a lot more than you might imagine, but that doesn't mean that you want to get away with more than you want. So try to make things as accurate as possible, but the most important thing is just to have a smooth curve that's as close to those marks as you can get. And so that's the drawing for the side panel. I'm not going to cut it out yet. I'm going to draw out the bottom panel. So I'm going to draw out this panel here, and then I'll probably start cutting things out. Before I started drawing all the points for the bottom panel, I drew this reference line right here. And so what that is basically just a zero line of my graph. So I'm using this as my new origin over in the corner here. And before I was using the corner of the board. You can do that, but you have to be really careful and make sure that your board is square and straight on the sides. But if you're doing a panel that is away from the edge of the board, then you have to do it this way, where you have a separate origin. You don't necessarily have to draw it out like that, but it makes life a whole lot easier if you do. The other thing I should mention is notice the gap between the panels. In the drawings, I don't actually show where on the piece of plywood to put these, so you can tell that this entire thing is a sheet of plywood, this big rectangle that I'm drawing in. But I don't show how far to space these apart. And the answer to that is basically try to keep them as close together as possible. Just keep in mind the width of the blade that you're using to cut. So if you're using something like a jigsaw with an 1/8 inch kerf, so the cut's an 1/8 inch wide, then you want to make sure that you have more than 1/4 inch between these two panels, or you're gonna be running into some major problems when you get onto the edge of the panels. Okay, so there we have it. Both the bottom and the side plank have been drawn out. And they look pretty good. If you look at the drawing here, it's a little bit easier to see on this one. It looks fairly similar. So I would say that that is pretty much a mission accomplished. All these parts are drawn correctly onto this piece of wood. So the next step would be to cut these out, and that's going to have to wait for another day because I don't have my tools with me. So I'll see you on the next video.